Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you are. Thank you for the latest in the WorkCast attending the latest in the WorkCast webinar series. I'm delighted today to have in person sitting next to me Bryan Rutberg from 3C Comms. Today's webinar is titled Customer Connection Strategies to Build More Valuable Relationships. Really excited to hear Bryan talk to you today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes as always. Top right of your screen you will see the ability to ask a question, so please feel free to put those questions in as we move along, and also you'll see a resources tab. We've got a couple of giveaways for you today, so feel free to click on the resources tab and click on those. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Bryan. Hi Bryan.
Good morning, Barney. Good morning, everyone tuned in.
Okay, that's great. And, let's get going, Bryan.
Let's do it. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to learn the WorkCast platform and to get ready to talk about one of my favorite subjects, how companies and organizations can build closer relationships that do more for them with their customers. And when I say customers throughout this, I know all of you will hear other audiences as well. Sometimes it's your employees, sometimes it's your business partners, sometimes it's your investors. But we're going to talk about the things that you can do in order to build great relationships and how those relationships can pay off for your business, your nonprofit, your volunteer world. We're going to have three sections to today's conversation. We're going to talk about just how hard it is to get people's attention. We're going to talk about why it's worth the effort, and we are going to really focus in on how you can take the first steps to doing it like an expert. We also have, as Barney mentioned, two special offers for you today. You'll just click on that resources tab on the top right, and you'll see two things that you can access. The first is a download of a workbook that will help you with the messaging framework we're going to talk about later. The second is an opportunity to do a free consult with me or a member of our 3C team to talk about how to bring this goodness into your organization so we can magnify the learning from today. Let's get going. But first I have to ask you, pay attention. Now, why would I start with a slide that presumes you're not going to pay attention? Why would I begin with telling you you've got to pay attention? That seems like bad form for someone who is putting on a webinar, right? You're here, you've tuned in, I'm assuming you're paying attention. Well, I know it's hard to do. I can ask, but I think I need to give you a reason why you should pay attention. So let's turn the tables and let me ask you a question to get things started. Barney, we got a poll ready to roll?
I've just fired that poll up for you, Bryan. That's up on the screen, so we'll just give people a few seconds to answer that. The question is, do you think of yourself as busy? Regularly feel like you have too much time and too little to do? Simple answer, yes or no. So get your results in, and we're going to pull those results in now.
Is the suspense killing you? Oh, look at that. Gee, everybody thinks they're busy. Well, this is my first point, right? Let's go on to our next slide here. Everybody feels like they are stressed, right? Everybody feels that it is hard to pay attention. It's hard for anybody to get through the clutter because you've got social media that is vying for your attention. Maybe the car needs a service or a maintenance repair, or maybe the dog needs a walk, or the kid's school just called, or the phone dinged. It is harder and harder to pay attention in a busy world where we are all electronically connected and we're all trying to live our work lives, our family lives, our volunteer lives. There's a lot going on, right? So how hard is it to cut through the clutter? Well, we have another question for you to guide us into the next point we want to make about it's tough to get through.
I fired it up for you there, Bryan.
Very good.
So the question is, in addition to the window for this webinar, obviously none of you will be watching anything else, how many other windows and other browser tabs do you have open right now? So just pick your answer there and we'll bring the results in. Just give you a couple of seconds and we'll get those results now. Wow, so a broad range there. We got a range between not even 1, 3 to 5. We've got 37% of you got nearly five browsers open. 10 or more. We've got some people there with 10 or more browsers open. That's amazing.
Right. Well, I want to thank everyone who's on the line because you are helping me make my point, right? When we have lots of things going on, it is harder to pay attention. I read a survey or an article recently that showed that over 20 times an hour, roughly every 3 minutes, a little less than every 3 minutes, somebody pays attention to something else. They're bringing up a new screen, they're changing a tab, they find themselves derailed from their line of thought, right? In fact, one study that Microsoft had done estimates the average person's attention span has been reduced to 8 seconds. Now, I've always found that claim a little bit hard to believe, but then I start flicking through Twitter or Facebook, or I realize I've got 4 tabs open because I'm in the middle of 4 different emails I'm trying to send off, and I realize I'm addicted to that dopamine hit also, and it's hard to stay on task. And frankly, even if the average attention span is double or triple or even 10 times that 8-second estimate, that's not exactly Nobel Prize territory. So as marketers, we're marketing into a world where people feel busier than ever, and they're not helping themselves because they are so easily distracted. Let's go to the next poll and find out what our audience is thinking.
So there we go. So do we think that there are more, fewer, or about the same number of commercial messages trying to get through to you as compared to 5 years ago? So, you know, that's an interesting, got to cast your mind back there to 2013 and see what's going on. So we've got 3 answers there, more, about the same, and fewer. So let's just pull those results in now. We're expecting to see... Wow. There we go. Everybody nailed it. 100% of you said that there are more. So I think that proves Brian's point.
Folks, you're helping me, and I appreciate it, right? You're making the point that seems right up there. It has been estimated that we see, and you know, there's today, May the 17th, we see some 4,000 messages directed at us every single day. That's billboards, that's other outdoor advertising, bus stops, that's everything we see online as we're scrolling through pages. It's magazines and newspapers, it's radio and television, nearly 1.5 million times a year. Just do the math on 4,000 times 365. Nearly 1.5 million times a year, somebody is trying to get inside your head. All right, we got one more question for you, and then we'll move into the meat of this.
So let me just fire it up for you now. So the question is, do you subscribe to a service whose value proposition includes being commercial free? So we've given you some examples here. So examples would be Netflix, HBO, Hulu, Amazon, or other demand video, a music service like Spotify, Pandora, etc., a website or a blog which has an ad-free option, or you use an ad blocker and you record your favorite shows and you fast forward through the commercials. So choose one of those answers. We're going to pull the results in now. Okay, 50-50. So everybody subscribed to a video service. That's amazing. And then some people record their shows and fast forward through them.
All right, and of course, the intention of this was not to be an either or. The thought is that many of us. I mean, how about you, Barney? You probably do many of these strategies.
I'm guilty.
To avoid, yeah,
guilty.
Well, and of course, it's not guilty. It's self-preservation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. If you subscribe to a cable television service that does not have commercials, if you get into your car and you turn on satellite radio, when you look at your browser, if you're using an ad blocker, most of us use many of these strategies to avoid getting the commercial messages that are being sent toward us. In fact, look at the subscription growth with Netflix over the last 6 years, right? A 30% almost compound annual growth rate. And if you saw earlier this month Jeff Bezos' annual shareholder letter, he announced that Amazon Prime has broken the 100 million member barrier. And now consider how many of us who are subscribers to Netflix or Amazon Prime share those subscriptions within our households, or maybe even with people outside of our households, and that amplification of the hundreds of millions of people who subscribe to these, right? What have we just shown here with these surveys that you've helped us by answering? Right, here's a quick recap. This poor, tired-looking woman looks like all of us. We're busy. We have short attention spans. Messages are coming at us fast and furious. And we're hiding from them if we can. And the marketplace that we're trying to reach with our messages about our organizations, in order to carry forward our mission and do the work in the world that we want to do, they've got to be good to make a difference. And we've got to be able to get customers who really understand us and believe in us. Now, before we get on to how to do that, let me do a quick introduction for you. You already know my name. That's what I look like. I usually have a smile like that on my face. I spent 20 years in the corporate world with global firms like Hewlett-Packard and McKinsey and Company and Microsoft. My last couple of corporate roles, I helped Microsoft make close connections with senior executives from their biggest customer and partner companies inside of their executive briefing center. And I was a speechwriter for a senior executive at Microsoft. These days, I keep myself busy by consulting with companies on their marketing and messaging. I coach on messaging and storytelling and public speaking, and I'll let you decide at the end of this webinar, but I love public speaking, and I love teaching, and I love helping people build relationships. Our firm, 3C Comms, we call ourselves the 3 Cs for the Customer Connection Company. If we can help our clients build stronger and more productive relationships with the audiences that matter to them, we are fulfilling our mission. Thank you again for letting me cut through your clutter today. And if we can help, please take advantage of that 30-minute free consult with us. Again, go to that resources tab in the upper right, and we'll be able to schedule some time to talk with you about what's on your mind. Back to this, we're busy, our attention spans are short, there's lots coming at us, and most of us trying to avoid it actively. So the question becomes, how on earth do you get attention? How do you break through? How do you zero in and hit that target customer of yours? Well, where we start from is closeness counts. It's very important to be able to build a relationship as a brand with your customers or partners or employees or any other important audience. The evidence is very compelling. Let me go through a little bit of it with you. Right? Loyal customers are repeat customers. Right? Now, there's some variation between business-to-business statistics and business-to-consumer statistics, but the same principles apply. Close is better. If someone purchases from you one time, there's about a quarter of a chance they're going to purchase a second. But once a second purchase gets made, the odds jump to over 50% that they're going to make a third. It's our job to make sure that this happens. And I would imagine the statistics are the same if you substitute donor or volunteer if you're in a nonprofit.
And I see in B2B, Brian, exactly the same. When people initially licensed to WorkCast, the chances of them going on and buying something else are massively improved. Our growth rate on our customer base is absolutely extraordinary. We have I would echo these in B2B as well.
And you're investing, no doubt, in making sure that those relationships, once started, stay close.
Absolutely. We have an account team that's designated to do that.
Outstanding. So even more so, and to amplify your point, if 90% of your customers are spending that much with you, there's a 10% at the top that is spending almost 3 times as much. And for all of us as marketers, what do we have to do? We have to get more customers, sure, but they can't simply be clustered at the bottom of your customer period. Your goal has to be growing fans and advocates, not just transactional customers. Because loyalty counts, right? It's got a couple of characteristics to it. Not only can you decrease your customer acquisition cost if a lot of your business is coming through referrals, but you can increase your customer lifetime value as well when you turn them into folks who keep coming back to you and trust you to solve whatever problem it is you're asserting you're going to solve for them, right? And then there's the things you can't count. Sometimes your first and best customers, the people who will try your beta or the people who will try some new service for the first time, are going to be the folks who have been with you for a while. Many, many brands crowdsource content and they pull themselves out of the middle of the conversation with customers and let customers talk among themselves to amplify their brand messages. You can see the rest here. I've been with organizations that have taken advantage of advisory groups from loyal customers, and I've seen companies that hit a tough patch in the road, and the folks who stick with them, whether it's through controversy or just through some sort of a introduction of a product that doesn't just kill it in the marketplace, it's your loyal folks who will support you in tough times.
And we see, in B2B, and we're in the technology industry, we see an increasing rise of those referral sites, the Trustpilots, the G2 crowd, where people are going to seek, affirmation that a product or service is valued by other people. It becomes increasingly important, this referral and reference point.
Well, and to amplify this point, in customer lifetime value equations, a study in the financial services industry by Bain showed that a 5% increase in customer retention turns into more than a 25% increase in profit. So it's not just an increase in the lifetime value of a customer as you turn them into a loyal customer. It becomes more profitable as they do more business with you.
I agree.
And that's just, it's a fabulous thing. An internal communications example, the fast food chain Chick-fil-A connects so well with its employees, including but not exclusively with their communications efforts. Right? They connect so well with their employees. Its average turnover among store managers is 5% versus an industry average of over 30%.
Wow.
It's crazy, right? And how much does that advantage them in terms of store operations, training and onboarding of employees? It just magnifies. Let me give you one example from my life. I don't know, we don't have a poll set up for this, but smile to yourself if you are a Scotch whiskey drinker. My favorite happens to be Lefroy. And years ago, I filled out a little form online that I had been notified about when I got a little booklet in those attractive round casings that hold the bottles that I buy. And I became let's put it in air quotes, the owner of a 1 foot by 1 foot square of the Lefroy distillery, one of their peat bogs. And I know that someday when I fulfill a dream of going to Scotland and checking things out, I can go to Lefroy and they will give me a dram of whiskey, they'll loan me a pair of Wellington boots, and I can go out and enjoy a sip at my little spot of land. And periodically I get invited to tastings here in my native Seattle. I've got hats, I've got scarves, I've got a variety of other whiskey paraphernalia. And what does this mean that they have found a way to connect with me as a brand? It means that when I go into bars, I have actually convinced bar owners in my neighborhood that they should carry Lefroy for when I come in. I have purchased it for me and shared it with friends. I've even had tastings where I have gotten people to say, that is more interesting than I thought. It's a more robust taste. I'm an advocate for the brand. I'm a magnifier of their message. And then there's the examples of brands that get the advantage of loyal customers where they're not even, the brand itself is not even encouraging the activity. They're just at they're on the fringes of it, and yet the customers are so loyal that they will go to crazy lengths to support the brand. Check out about 18 seconds of this video, and then I've got another like 10 or 12 second clip for you.
Hey guys, how's it going? I am so excited right now because in front of me is the new iPhone 10 and I'm shaking. I am shaking with excitement, and I would say that this is an official unboxing, but I actually could not even wait until I got home, so I kind of already pre-opened this at my friend's house. So here is my initial reaction. Now, at the time of making this video, I've only had it for about half of a day, and in that half of a day, it has far exceeded my expectations, and that's something that I didn't actually think was possible. Like, I was excited for this phone, and now I'm really, really excited for it, and it's in the palm of my hands. So guys, I just wanted to give you...
Just think about that for a moment. No one is paying that young lady. Apple didn't know it was happening, and yet if you check out unboxing iPhone 10 or unboxing and name any Apple product over on YouTube, you will see hundreds of these videos of fans who are so excited about getting their new Apple product into their hands that they are creating videos of themselves opening the boxes. And there are people who are watching them. Imagine that kind of customer loyalty and customer fandom. All right, so now we get to how do you do it? How do we as marketers find a way to really connect with our audience? Now, you've probably heard about the rule of 7, right? They say it takes 7 times to get a message into someone's head before they even notice that it's coming, right? If it takes 7 impressions just to get noticed, how many more does it take to be remembered? And what happens if you're putting messages out there, but they're not connecting with your audience? And what if you're putting messages out into different channels and they don't align with one another, they don't buttress one another and amplify one another? You know, Barney, I was on the phone with a prospective client the other day. It's a museum, and they were getting ready for their annual financial campaign. And the woman that I was speaking with was responsible for getting out the annual campaign, and she had her email plan all put together, and it was going to be amplified with direct mail. And I told her that was great, and I asked, how is the social media you're doing going to support that?
Yeah.
And, well, that comes out of a different department.
She doesn't control that channel.
Right, exactly. And I asked if they were going to have posters in the front of the museum where people bought their tickets, or if they were going to train their ticket sellers or ticket takers to mention the campaign. I asked if there was going to be a button they were going to produce that they could have their docents or their guards in the museum wear. You can guess what the answer was.
I don't control that channel.
Exactly. This feels like, it not even feels like, this is a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to align your messages and how to get your entire organization on board. What have I done? Oh, I'm sorry, I went too quickly through that. At 3C, we work with our clients on being audience-focused and benefit-led with their messages. And we take 2 tools that are common to the industry, and we define them in a slightly different way, right? A messaging framework, which is where we're going to spend some time, and let me interrupt myself long enough to tell you, if you go to that resources tab on the page you're looking at, click it, you'll see 2 downloads available, or 2 items you can click. One of them will get you a much more detailed view of the messaging framework and access some narrated help for you to create your own inside of your organization. The messaging framework is going to answer a few questions for your organization and ultimately as you face the outside world. Who are you and who are you trying to reach? What is the persona you want to come across to the folks you're trying to reach? And how are you going to share your message? What devices are you going to use? And the communications plan takes those messages and asks what is the best format or what are the best channels to reach our folks. Are we going to be print? Are we going to be online? Are we going to be advertisements in publications, right? These are two separate things, and they go hand in glove with one another. Let's dig in a little deeper to the messaging framework.
I would say at one point that it's very easy to shortcut that step, isn't it? You know, we're very keen to push messages out very quickly. We feel like because of this attention span, we feel like we have to be making noise, and we don't do it in a coherent way. So taking that moment to do this messaging plan seems to me to be such a vital step in getting it right.
You're 100% correct, and I'd add to that, you've got to keep returning to your messaging framework to make sure you're using it and to refine it based on your learnings from what you're getting back from the market.
Okay.
So there's four things that a messaging framework does, right? It's going to focus on the audience. It's going to promote the benefits of your product or solution or your change initiative that you're trying to drive or the service that you offer. It helps both externally and internally to drive alignment of your message and drive alignment of the teams. If the woman from the museum had all of her colleagues on board and they had agreed on the messaging and they had known the timing of the annual campaign, they'd have been able to magnify the message a lot better. And a messaging framework should support, and this is the point I was just making, support all messaging efforts, right? A messaging framework is going to help you establish clarity and consistency in your message. It will strengthen your brand and overall brand message, and it creates a context for supporters to connect with your cause. Now, the next slide is a quick look at the messaging framework. It's a blank one, and I'll show you a little bit of it.
And I bet everybody online now can think of a scenario in their own business right now where they wish they'd done this better. I have no doubt I can think of one for us, and we're going through one of those right now. So, you know, it seems vital to me.
Absolutely. So this, if you were to Google messaging framework, you would see there's a variety of ways to do this. This happens to be ours. And where I like to start on a messaging framework is right in that middle section with the themes, right? Before you can determine a value proposition, before you can determine what your benefit statement is, you've got to start with what is it that we feel is compelling about our product, service, change initiative, whatever it is you're promoting. Each theme is only a couple of words or a simple concept. It can apply to multiple audiences. So let me give an example, if I may. If you were selling cars, you could use a phrase like a well-built car. And that can mean different things to different people and may lead you down a path to different choices in your messaging. But well-built car is a high-level concept and broad enough to give you a lot of ways to provide proof points. Could be shown by the number of rivets that you're putting into the car. It could be shown by the strength of the steel or the length of the warranty you give. Right, you get it, I'm sure. If it's a car that's safe or reliable or luxurious, these are good themes, very broad, very general, that you can frame for each audience's unique perspective. So what does well-built mean to the person that you want to influence and persuade, and then you can try and go a level deeper into their thinking. For example, how would you pitch a well-built car if you were putting an ad in Inc. magazine or Forbes magazine? And would you do it differently if you were putting an ad in Outside magazine or Working Parent magazine or Time magazine? And what if you were putting an ad into Car and Driver or Road and Track? Right? The fact that it is a safe car or a luxurious car, it doesn't change, but you come up with different expressions using different key messages and different stories to support it off of that theme. Now, once I've got my themes, I like to work with inside of our organization or with others to get those key messages. And there is literally a near infinite number of these. You fill them out as deep as you wish to go, depending upon the different audiences that you want to reach. But always, always, they support one another. Supporting points can be facts and figures. They can be stories, and in fact, they should be both. You want to have the detailed proof points, and you want to have the stories that get things across. So if safe were a theme and we carry forward the car example, one key message could be the roadside assistance that you offer to buyers of your automobile. And you can support that with facts like a response time guarantee or the number of operators you have standing by to take trouble calls from car drivers, or the number of incidents that you respond to each year. There's your facts and figures. And you also want a couple of stories, like the couple who's on their way to their daughter's wedding who has a breakdown and you were able to help them get there on time, or the salesperson stranded on a country road somewhere who's going to be late to an appointment if not for your help, right? And these key themes carried forward into specific messages to specific audiences and the supporting facts and the supporting stories, that's what builds out a messaging framework and gets you something to use over and over again.
Great question coming in here, and keep those questions coming in. So question is, who do you go to in the organization to go and get those stories? And is that, do you go out to everybody, or does that just come out of the marketing department?
I love the question. The best way to do it is to not only include everybody who does marketing and messaging inside of your organization to develop the messaging framework. It is to stress to anybody who touches the audience you're trying to reach, customer support reps, salespeople, marketers, your senior executives. It's to turn your organization into a story-capturing organization, and that's an essential step to becoming a storytelling organization. We've worked with organizations that have started providing incentives to people in their company in order to get them to write down stories and share them. We have begun with sharing stories at internal team meetings, and then taken the best of those and turned them into marketing tools for our clients. The answer is they come from everywhere, and a good marketer is going to reach out broadly in the organization and actually find a way to run a campaign, if you will, internally, stressing the value of these stories.
And we find that that's really important, so you don't get this disconnect between what marketing think the value proposition is and the rest of the organization, sales, delivery, support, elsewhere.
It can be tremendously clarifying, can't it, to actually get the voice of the customer into your marketing. So, and once we've got this set of ideas about our themes and all the messages and supporting points and stories we want to use, then it's time to work on the top of the framework. And in reality, of course, these things tend to happen simultaneously. Nobody goes into, unless you're a brand new organization, you don't go into a messaging framework exercise not knowing something about your customer base, your desired target audience, the perceptions you want to drive. But getting these things written down in a coherent and thoughtful way, it takes massive organization inside of, massive coordination inside of an organization to get a whole group inside of a company or a whole company to agree on these things. And the mere act of driving some consensus is absolutely invaluable in order to come up with a messaging framework. Now, I should add, these messaging frameworks are purely internal. It's not the kind of thing you're going to share with the customer. So you can afford a little bit of, let's not say fudging it, but a little bit of leaving it for later, as long as you go through the exercise, you're probably accomplishing your goal.
And in a shameless plug for you and 3C, Brian, this is the kind of thing that 3C can help with, right? They can help track down those stories, craft those stories.
That is shameless, and I appreciate it deeply. Yeah, this is the work that we, as a marketing consulting firm and an agency actually taking over certain aspects of marketing for our clients, do. And we will facilitate among leadership teams, among marketers, sessions in order to help drive and kickstart this effort to build the messaging framework. Let me show you a few more examples. A messaging framework, here's a little bit of guidance as to what goes into the messaging framework. I won't linger here because it's available to you if you go to that resources tab to download. And the culmination of the exercise that you get to observe in the downloadable workbook and audio guidance is this. I took advantage of my name, Rutberg, and created a fictional restaurant that maybe someday I'm actually going to ask to open for Bryan's Rutburgers. Here is a completely filled out messaging framework. I could have added a lot more to the theme-specific key messages and the supporting points and stories, but I've put in enough for everybody to get a general idea of what goes into a messaging framework and what does it look like when it's completed. And as we discussed, having a messaging framework is only step one. It's an important step, and it does get the job done of aligning internal thinkers, but it's actually using the messaging framework and turning it into action with your communications plan that matters. Let's spend a couple of minutes there, and then we'll get ready for some questions. All right? No matter what channel you're using, radio, television, online, print, no matter what you're using, you're going to be harping on the same themes over and over. Different channels, same themes. You might tell different stories, but they all ladder up to the same theme. You might even have a slightly different look to your advertising or marketing efforts or email or whatever it is you're using, but they're all going to use the same theme. And carrying the thought forward, when an individual connects with you, whether they're calling your customer support center, or they are attending a live event with you, or when they're working with a salesperson, or when they are opening a piece of direct mail or email, or they're finding you on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or wherever you are in social, they should experience your brand the same way. The real value of a messaging framework, you can see down at the bottom here, is it ends up being the single source of truth for what you say. I was working with a client yesterday they've got a new patent and they're trying to sell the patent to a highest bidder. And there's, like any inventor, like any product designer, there's a million things they can say about this patent and all the great stuff that it's going to enable for the eventual buyer. Yeah. And yet, our discussion yesterday focused wholly on what are the four main things you are going to focus on when you tell the message, when you tell the story.
Yeah.
So it absolutely requires it requires discipline to create the messaging framework and then to stick to it, but the advantages that it brings of getting your message across to the audience you're trying to reach, and knowing that when you can catch them, when they're busy, when they're actively avoiding messaging, when they have a short attention span, when you do catch them, the more you catch them with the same message, the easier it's going to be to get it to sink in and to drive that kind of loyalty that we're after.
So, I know this section is coming next, and I think this is really important. We come up with the messaging. We are in marketing. We deem ourselves as being creative, but there's an art to good storytelling, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so now let's go back and think about how we really capture attention. And facts and figures can light up a few parts of the brain, but they're relatively easily either dismissed or just forgotten. it's really stories and bringing human emotion into the conversation and allowing your audience to put themselves in the shoes of someone else that you're telling them about that starts to create the closeness. What do you need to do? You need to be able to hook your audience early as you're moving towards telling a story about your brand and your message, right? And that can be with a picture that catches their eye, just as we've got here. It could also be some sort of provocative question. It can be trying to drive them through a set of emotions, fear and hope and anger and opportunity. I mean, these are all valid ways of getting someone's heart, not just head, into your message. Because end of the day, ultimately, it's stories and emotion that drive someone to notice you. All right, if you tell me that your car has 365 spot welded rivets of the highest quality to the highest quality, so that's super, and I can use that to justify a decision I've already made, but it's the emotion of thinking about that new car smell, or how I'm going to look getting out of this hot little number, or whatever it is that you decide you're going to try and push, that really gets through the clutter. We are, as a species, geared for stories. A story catches our attention, it makes our brain light up, and there's a simple rubric for thinking about how do I create a story. Lots of people get caught up on, well, I don't know if I have stories. A story is really anything that has a current state, that's now, something that happens, that's next, and then you arrive at some new state of being. Now, I've got a picture of an egg here. This egg, it could be breakfast, it could be a chick hatching, it could be a snake or an alligator hatching. It could be, who remembers the movie Rocky, where he's out there getting ready for the big fight that he's been given the opportunity for? He cracks half a dozen eggs into a glass, and no, he doesn't fry them up or scramble them. He drinks the whole thing down. Yep. There's a now, there's a next, there's a new. A conventional way, the English major way of saying this is there's a situation, there's a complication, and then there's some resolution. And that could be as simple as the example I gave earlier. There's a couple, they're driving down the road, their car breaks down, they use the roadside assistance service provided by the manufacturer, and they make it to their daughter's wedding on time. Situation, they're on their way to the wedding. Complication, the car breaks down. Resolution, your brand came to the rescue. If this is interesting to you and you'd like to dig deeper, we're not going to spend a lot more time on it today because we do want to get to Q&A. But please take advantage of the free 30-minute consult with us. Go to that resources tab on the top right. One more thing to know about stories. Often there's a hero, there's a villain, and there's some destination. I think you can see how this fits the car example we've been using through this webinar. You've got to show how your actor gets through the crisis and arrives safely at their emotional or even their physical destination. And just to tie it all back into the main theme of building customer closeness and how that drives better sales results and builds loyalty, companies that tell outstanding stories have much higher annual growth rates of revenue than companies that don't. It's an absolutely critical characteristic in today's world of business and nonprofits that if you are telling stories, you are getting the right relationships built with your customers, your donors, your volunteers, and if you're not, you are missing out on a tremendous opportunity to build the kind of loyalty that decreases customer acquisition costs, increases customer lifetime value, and makes for loyalists who will be by your brand's side. So I want to close with a question for all of you. How are you going to create community among your audience base, among your customers, among your employees, among the partners you count on to amplify your message and resell or install or complement your solution, among your investors. How will you use a messaging framework and consistent messages and storytelling and facts that go along with your key themes? And how will you use stories to create a community that is as excited about you as that woman we saw earlier is about her new Apple iPhone 10? How are you going to get people loyal to you? That's it. Last reminder, please take advantage of the free 30-minute consult to improve your messaging. We can brainstorm your messaging framework with you. And don't forget, right by that clickable link is the link to download more detail on what is a messaging framework and how you can complete one for your organization. Barney, I hope we have some questions.
We have some great questions.
Outstanding.
So let's crack into these. We've got a few minutes to do some of these. So in no particular order, because they kind of come in through the presentation, have you got any recommendations of tools that companies use, like software tools to capture stories from other parts of their organization? I can think of one, for example, Slack or something like that, where we're reaching out via technology to help capture those stories rather than trying to kind of physically be with people. Have you seen any good examples of that?
Absolutely. Slack is a good one. Thanks for suggesting it. And Slack, Microsoft Teams, I've seen companies set up SharePoint sites. I've even seen organizations just put a box with a slot in it in their break room. Exactly. If you've got a story, share it. I've seen companies provide incentives, like some sort of a prize for the best story of the month.
Yeah.
And people will share them with their managers, or they'll share them with the person who's responsible for running a particular monthly meeting, and they'll get the chance to try out their stories in front of a friendly audience of employees.
Yeah. A great question on your kind of storytelling piece here, that having the different sections. How when you've got the different sections of a story, how would you do that for different formats or different channels like Twitter, for example? How can you tell a story like that on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on Facebook, where you have to create this compelling story? What's the best mediums for these things?
Well, we know from surveys and reports that have been done, studies that have been done, that pictures capture much more attention than plain text, tweets or Facebook posts, and we know that video is even stronger than pictures. You can tell a story through a series of tweets, a nice thread, and you could tell the same story by having a video component or an audio component to your online social posts. There are things that organizations use to play out a story over time, revealing a little bit at a time in a serial fashion, just like Dickens in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And there's great modern storytelling capability with even the simplest of videos, something you might be able to do with a phone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we at WorkCast, being a webinar platform, we track a lot of the stats, and video is gold. So that's the new text, isn't it? It's the and it lends itself to social channels. Allows you to post those videos in multiple places, et cetera, et cetera. So
one more thought on that.
But it's hard. Creating good video story is hard, though.
Creating a good video story can be difficult for a brand. Think about how easy it is, though, if you're able to crowdsource it.
That's a great point.
We're working with one client who is making a transition from being a pure business-to-business seller of their product to becoming a business-to-consumer seller of their product as well. And as we do this, we are encouraging users of the product to post videos of themselves using it. It's a food-related brand, and we're encouraging people to tell their own stories of what it means for them to use this, to bake with this food, and to share the pictures of the creations that they've made, share stories of their families enjoying it, to swap recipes online. All of those count as stories, and the brand, other than providing the platform to do it, literally has no work to do.
Their customers have created the story.
Exactly.
So a great piece of advice here from the audience as well. So about breaking stories up into micro stories. I think you talked about doing a series of trying to build a story through a series of tweets or a series of posts or a series of articles, and you're building that story that way.
Yeah,
If you can't create video, that might be another way to do it.
Thank you to whoever put that comment in. Much appreciated.
Good question here about building those stories. About how do you test resonance of these stories? So, is there a way to test whether your messaging works? You put all the effort into creating your messaging and your value propositions and your statements. How do you test whether they're resonating?
Yeah, we're going to need another webinar for that one, Barney. The short answer is if you're driving dialogue, if your salespeople or your customer support folks or your executives, when they are meeting with customers, have your message parroted back to them, you've got some anecdotal evidence that it's working.
Okay.
Online testing, A/B testing, multivariate testing, monitoring if your number of clicks and engagement are going up. There's tools aplenty to do that. This is a much longer conversation.
And I guess
you got ideas?
And you go, I guess you got to check which is your most important channels, haven't you? So you can, whatever your most important channel typically is, whether that's online or offline, use the measurement technique that you use for everything else in that channel.
And to make it rather specific, we frequently talk with clients who believe they need to be on every social platform out there. And I think you and I have discussed this offline before. There is an art and a science to figuring out where you need to be, putting a stake in the ground and saying, no, we're not going to do certain things. A good communications plan not only takes advantage of the messaging framework, but it limits the number of places you're going to get to market to those that are going to be effective for your brand and your message.
And so this alignment point is a really good one. So a question here about how do you train people to make sure you get consistency of that message through all parts of your organization? Well, our audience is a range of small and large organizations. Some people, they can get them all in a room, but some people they can't. So how do you make sure that everybody is aligned on that message?
Whether you're a small organization or a large one, if you've got a marketing department or people responsible for messaging across different parts of the organization, it comes from top-down approval. Right? The message from the top of the organization needs to be, I believe that we have a story we're going to tell to our customer base, our partners, our employees, and we are going to stick to that story. It starts with getting consensus around the development of a messaging framework, which is a great way of getting everybody's voice into the mix and getting people to salute it and say, yes, we will live this. And then it does usually take some amount of enforcement. There needs to be a designated individual who can make sure that what's coming out from the organization actually fits what you said you wanted to portray to the public with the messaging framework. We've got clients who will regularly pull together a group of marketers from different parts of the organization or messengers from different parts of the organization just to do sort of a standing status update. What are we doing this month? What are the company's key priorities? What is our messaging going to amplify? What's going on in Department A that needs to be replicated or amplified by Department E, F, and G? And that sort of keeping all the messengers connected with one another and keeping them in dialogue with one another, it's the essential step to making sure that everything you put out there fits to your framework.
And there's a great comment that's come in here, which is about getting that top-down approach. Is if you want to get that sponsorship from the top, it isn't just about presenting the story to them, is it? It's about giving them a role to play. So
thank you. That's a great point. Yeah.
And so actually, if you give them something to do, so you give them a voice, or you task them with some way of delivering that story out, they become wedded to it.
And if you are a messenger or a marketer in your organization and you're contemplating how on earth will I ever get senior management to pay attention long enough to want to play a role in in policing, if you will, a message that we're going to have in the messaging framework, go back to the middle slides of this webinar that talk about increasing customer lifetime value, decreasing customer acquisition cost, show them the videos of people unboxing their Apple phones, and talk about getting that kind of crowdsourced excitement and that kind of results in terms of increases in sales, customer base, loyal customers, and profitability. It all comes down to the business essentials of we have to sell more and we have to make a profit at it.
We're running out of time, but I've got one final question here, and this is actually from me. And one of the challenges of that small companies have is the frequency of change of that messaging. So if we got any advice, just to wrap it up, how long should you run? You pick a message, you've done all the work of the messaging content, you've driven it out, you're putting it out through channels. How long do you stick with it for before you have another go at something else? It's an open-ended answer.
It
depends.
It does depend. If you've developed the messaging framework in the right way, and you have done it based on some knowledge of what your customers are already responding to, or what you think the key points are, and you're going to push them well, these things, without quite being evergreen, can last for a good long time. Because what changes is not the themes and not the outcome you're after, but the stories that you tell, and that's why you need to be a story capturing organization, to be a storytelling organization. And you'll always have something new to say, some new facts and figures to share, because products don't stand still. But the theme, a safe car isn't suddenly not going to be a safe car, and a safe car isn't going to suddenly, you're not going to want to push some other message.
We're nearly on the hour, Bryan, so I wanted to thank you. I wanted to reach out to the audience and thank you.
Thank you all.
Please feel free. This link doesn't go down, so if you want to come back and take that resources, take that messaging framework, feel free to share that with your teams. They can come down and download that as well. Bryan, I want to thank you today for your insight, your storytelling, and your great presentation. Thank you all for attending. We look forward to seeing you again soon on the next webinar. In fact, the next webinar from WorkCast is about presenter best practice on webinars. So what a great presentation that's going to be. So thanks, Bryan. Thanks, everybody. And we look forward to